Warning. The following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
And we're back. Okay, I know it's been a little while, but I promise you it's worth the wait. This is an episode that I've been wanting to do, and more importantly, it's someone I've been wanting to do it with. From the Rogues Gallery podcast, he's also got his very cool web series. You need to check it out with Lucy Chandler. I'm such a bad host because I can't remember the actual official name. I just call it Lucy Chandler shorthand. Chris Schrader, tell me what a terrible host I am because I got the name wrong.
No, it's great. It's the strange case of Lucy Chandler. It's a little unwieldy. I forgive you. But
I was like, it's not Odd Life of Timothy Green. Damn it. I knew it's something. It's
definitely not that. I don't know. But thank you for having me back. And this one was a long time coming. And I appreciate your patience because I love the show. I'm sad that it's ending, although I obviously completely understand. I would have been so bummed if I couldn't be a part of your final season in some way. So I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen.
I like that when you first were on, we did Prometheus, and that was like a dipping the toe in the water. And I was like, let's do 3 movies the next time. So we did a trilogy over 2 episodes. Then I was like, all right, let's really challenge you and do 5 movies because we are talking about the entire Die Hard franchise. Now, Chris, I have 2 things. I think one is going to work in your favor, and I think one is not going to work in your favor. So let's get the positives out first. Number 1, I'm letting you off the leash today. This is listener discretion advised. There's going to be swearing. You can't do a Die Hard.
You know what?
You can't do a Die Hard without it. Did you really mentally prep for the last 2 weeks of how to say these things without swearing?
What I was going to suggest was because Live Free or Die Hard 4.0, depending on where in the world you are. That was the movie that sort of lit the fuse for this episode. And so I was going to say, in the spirit of that film, since I always struggle with profanity when I'm on your show, that instead of bleeping it out, if you could just put a gunshot sound over it every time I curse.
That's a great idea. And I totally have the time and the energy to edit in.
Well, you were going to go in and put all the beeps in anyways. Just make it a gunshot. But no, that's okay. So
I say, fuck it, we're doing.
It's the unrated director's cut. All right.
Because you can't have this episode without.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
It's just not possible. You can't not do it. So, get the kids out of the room, put the women and children to bed. They shouldn't be listening to this episode. No, but really, I've had parents tell me the whole reason that there's no swearing on the show, by the way, is because I got a very positive comment after I think it was the first or second episode. It was like, love your show. Wish I could listen to it in the car, but I drive around the kids. I was like, you know what? Let's not do that. But you know what? They shouldn't be watching these movies anyway until they're older. So that is, I'm letting you off the leash. The thing that might stick in your craw is I know you're a very organized guy. I think that's one of the things I admire about you. You're very polite and you're very organized. But we're going to go so wildly out of order when talking about these movies today that I kind of just want to see you just like, oh, God, where is it? Where did I? Yeah, we're going out of order because I think it's very important when we talk about Die Hard and we talk about specifically why I would rank the Die Hards where I rank them. We're going to go mostly in the order that I saw them. Okay. But first, we are going to start. There's an elephant in the room, a big fat elephant in the room. And I just want to start there. We are going to start with 2013's A Good Day to Die Hard, the 5th entry in the Die Hard saga. Chris, this movie, and this is not a bit, this is not me being facetious, this is not a joke. This movie changed the course of the rest of my life. That is 100% a true statement. And we're going to get there. But before we do, your thoughts going into A Good Day to Die Hard, because Die Hard 4 had just come out in 2007. It had been a 6-year pause. I remember this was like, people were really looking forward to this one. It was going to be kind of this big deal. And then they were like, it's coming out on Valentine's Day. I was like, Oh no, that seems like a February drop is, maybe I'm just overthinking this. Maybe February's the new May. Who knows? It was not.
It was not a good day to Die Hard, it turns out. And I do remember, I remember being really excited about the idea of a fifth Die Hard movie. And then as it was coming together and you were getting news about they're casting John McClane's son, and here's who's on the short list for that. And even when you just looked at those names, starting to get the sense that, oh man, is this going to be one of those attempted handoff movies where now the Die Hard movies are going to continue with his son? Because it feels like that's kind of what they're going for with these actors they're looking at. That's not something I think ever works, and it was not something I was excited to see in a Die Hard movie. And then this one, though, it's the early word on it was so bad. It's the only Die Hard movie I did not go out of my way to see. I did not see this in theaters. And it's the only Die Hard movie I have only seen once.
Okay. So yeah, this one was, so we'll get there, but I really enjoyed Live Free or Die Hard. And there were a lot of like little red flags coming out along the way. I think the February release date was the first one where I was like, that's probably not a great sign. But Valentine's Day, again, though, like, what dude takes their girl to a Die Hard movie on Valentine's Day? This guy.
It's kind of programming for all the single guys. You actually did it, though. You actually brought a date.
I did. Well, we're heading there. I think the other thing is, you're right. The passing it off, the legacy thing, I really sat down and tried to think. I was like, when does the son of the hero really work? And all I could think of were examples where it's just like, they tried it with The Mummy, that third Mummy movie, disaster. They tried it with Indiana Jones and Shia LaBeouf, disaster. Right. And then I was like, well, Indiana Jones, it worked the other times. Like, that's because you already knew the son and they introduced the father. Other way around, not gonna happen. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know why. I didn't know then what I know now, that Jai Courtney pretty much is a like automatic pass from me these days. He is, quite frankly, he is like the Sam Worthington of the next generation. Like, why are you making this a thing? Why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. They burn bright and they burn fast and that's it. And it's just, the thing that is unfortunate with Jai Courtney is he had a run of what were clearly intended to be sort of star-making performances, and they were all sort of duds, and he was often singled out as being just like, he's just kind of a block of wood. And then, even though this is a movie I really don't like, you see something like Suicide Squad, he pops in that movie. He has charisma to spare in that one. So I'm not sure why there's such a hard, it's like he was a good actor in a bad movie in that case. And then there are all these other, he's had, I don't know, all of these other chances where it's just like, I don't know what happened, why they can't, why that charisma shows up there and not in some of these other roles. But it's just like, yeah, woof. I mean, honestly, the whole A Good Day to Die Hard debacle really feels like someone came up with the tagline, Yippee-ki-yay, Mother Russia, and they were like, oh, that's funny. And then they just reverse engineered a movie from that. That's kind of...
Totally.
That's how much thought it feels like went into this one.
Yeah, it doesn't quite... Look, I'm not going to try to wax poetic that all the titles of the movies definitely fit the plot, but it's like, of all of them, it's like... This makes it like Live Free or Die Hard. That movie's definitely about civil liberties and all this other stuff. So I was like, okay, it's in Washington. I kind of get it. This, I'm like, no, you probably had a list of titles, and that one was the one that you went with. And the other thing about this one is I'm not going to try to front that there's no CGI kind of stunts in the other ones, especially Live Free or Die Hard. But good God, when your centerpiece, the one that you put in all the teasers and the commercials of them kind of jumping off, it's down and the helicopter's going and they crash through the glass ceiling and then they crash into the pool. Right. It's just so poorly rendered and just so cutscene of a video game. I hated it. So why is this movie so impactful for my life? Like, literally, the life that I have right now would possibly not exist without this movie. At the time, I was in a relationship. And it wasn't. It was a very serious relationship, but it just felt something was off. Something was off. Couldn't put my finger on it. Things had definitely taken a turn by this point. Valentine's Day weekend, I had to basically convince her to spend the weekend with me. It was like, this is strange. We were inseparable for the last year, and now Valentine's Day, you're like, I don't know, I may have other things to do. I was like, okay. So we see Die Hard, and it's awful. It's just so bad that I can't wrap my head around the facts. I was like, well, this isn't going to help anything at all. Like, this is I don't know why, but it's like
funny
just
that you
walking.
thought it might.
No, but you know how sometimes you go and like you see something. It's like maybe we'll both walk out. Like, that was so much fun, and just the high of the. Yeah. I don't know. So, look, when you're grasping at straws, you got to try anything, man. This my girlfriend, who we were gonna probably get engaged in the next 6 months, couldn't stand my face, and I couldn't figure out why. You're gonna try anything. So we walk out of the movie, and I was like, oh, I can't get over how bad that was. What do you think? She's like, shrugs. She's like, I liked it. And I was like, all right, there's one of two things happening here. One is, when you're at the end of a relationship and it's just like there's so much tension and anger, but you don't have a way to channel it out, that you just start finding pockets to make a fight.
Yes.
I was like, all right, so she's saying she likes it just to be contrarian because she wants to root for the team that I'm against. Or two, we watched the same movie, and I swear to God, Chris, this is not a bit. We watched the same thing, and we're just so wildly on different paths and just think so differently about even something as mundane as how terrible this movie is. Either one of those two is what's happening, and both of those two means this is just not going to work. We broke up later that week. I met my wife a couple months later.
And the director of A Good Day to Die Hard says, "You are welcome, sir." You know what I love about this is that there's a lot of high fidelity going on here, because what you just said reminds me a lot about his whole speech about, call me shallow, but the things that we like, they matter, our taste in movies and music and all this. But then also because it feels like we're going through these movies biographically for you, and that's the way he organizes his record collection. I love that you're doing the high fidelity with the Die Hard franchise. That's fantastic. The one thing I did remember about this I wanted to bring up that I don't know if this came up when you were researching anything, is that another red flag for this movie was the screenwriter, Skip Woods, who doesn't just have an inexplicable resume if you look him up on IMDb, but the rumor was Skip Woods was not a real person, that Skip Woods was the Alan Smithy for screenwriters. And for listeners that aren't aware, Alan Smithy used to be the pseudonym that they would throw on a film when the director lobbied to have his name taken off of it. And they had to, put some type of attribution up there. And so Alan Smithy, totally fake guy. And I got to say, when you look, I don't know if this is true or not, but when you look at the dude's IMDb page, it's like the only thing that makes sense as far as how he keeps getting hired for these high profile action movies. I mean,
just Wikipedia, just looking at his page, it looks like a Mike Myers character. I don't know if you saw.
Yes, I did. Yes. And I saw that he has an Instagram page, and I saw that and I was like, oh shit, this whole thing, it's such a fun rumor. It's about to get busted. But his account is private. And so I was so tempted, I would like to really like maybe if I send him a request, he'll add me and I can get to the bottom of this. And just like, I'm not going that deep for Billy's Die Hard episode, but this is a fascinating.
I would have appreciated it, but you know what? I almost like not knowing better, because this looks like the biggest catfish episode I've ever seen. Maybe I should reach out to MTV and be like, okay, so I know we're going on a tangent here, but on his Wikipedia page, you know what it says under personal life? Woods lives in Los Angeles, California. That's what it says under personal life. That's it.
What an interesting bit of trivia.
That's it. Yeah, you're right. This is so weird. Swordfish, I think it's fun. Hitman, horrible. X-Men Origins, horrible. A-Team, fun.
Fine,
How do you
yeah.
go from A-Team to Good Day to Die Hard in the same stretch? That's crazy.
Didn't he write, in quotes, write both Hitman movies?
He did.
That's
Agent
okay.
47, yeah.
That to me is the strongest piece of evidence that there's an element of fiction here, because who puts out the first Hitman movie and goes, oops, let's reboot this, and then hires the same screenwriter?
I just hear, I look at this and I hear Robert Stack's voice in my head like, is Skip Woods an actual writer?
We need to get to the bottom of this.
we need to submit this to Unsolved Mysteries. Who is Skip Woods? The fakest name I've ever heard.
Please make this hard left turn in season 3 Unsolved Mysteries. The world needs to know. The A-Team is the only one that doesn't totally fit. Like, I don't think that's a great movie, but I don't think it's awful. But who knows? Who knows what happened behind the scenes with, I don't know. Aaron Sorkin is like, I will not put my name on what you did to my A-Team script.
Yeah, I guess Alan Smithy is like the kayfabe. The cover is already blown. If you put that on a movie, everyone knows it sucks. So Skip Woods is the new Alan Smithy. I would love that. I think we could just end the show here. I have nothing else to add to this franchise that's more interesting than Skip Woods at this point. So yeah, I have nothing else to say about A Good Day to Die Hard. It was a great day for my relationship to die just in flames, and I'm very grateful for it. So this movie is so painful. I think I watched about 9 minutes of it for this, and then I was like, no, I'm good. I get it.
I couldn't do it. I feel shitty. But yeah, this was the only one I didn't make it through. And the thing that stood out the most in I think I maybe got like 11 or 12 minutes. I went a little bit further than you did. But what I remember most about this one is that the change in the way they shot the action, and I know this was deliberate. I remember the director saying he was trying to evoke a Saving Private Ryan style of action. And that's definitely a choice. But one of the things I think is true of the first 3 Die Hard movies in particular is just how fluid the action is and how few cuts there are when you go back and watch it now. Like, way less than a lot of people probably realize, because so much of it just comes down to being really smart about the blocking of the actors and how they're moving the camera. And as a result, they can accomplish in one shot what feels like might be broken up into 8 or 9 shots now. And a lot of the complaints that fans have about the 4th one, like how McClane doesn't feel like the same character anymore, or how the tone is all wrong, this is the one that made me feel that way. This is the one I walked out of going, that was not a Die Hard movie, not in any way, shape, or form, not even a little bit. Feels more like one of those Luc Besson produced action movies. It's more Taken 4 than Die Hard 5. And I'm not saying I dislike those Luc Besson action movies. There are some of them I'm quite a big fan of, but that's just not what I want from a Die Hard movie.
Yeah, even as it commits such a cardinal sin that I really dislike in franchises, which is where they change the aspect ratio on this one as opposed to all the other movies, and it just looks cheaper. It looks lesser quality. It's just like lit like crap. The CG is just lit so overlit that it just looks so fake. Nothing about it just feels like they're as bored making it as I am watching it.
Yeah.
It does feel like a direct to Redbox, Bruce Willis got hired for a couple days to be on it type of feel, even though he's the star of it. So there's got to be someone out there that's like, oh, I really like this movie. It actually got a B+ cinema score, so that means, well, we actually do know who liked this movie. I could probably try to find where she lives now and just ask her. I wish I would have asked during the breakup. It was a breakup phone call, by the way. So even more personal. But I wish it would have just been like Jerry Seinfeld, like, this is going to work. Why don't you like Die Hard? Like just at the very last minute. What do you like about that movie? No! But I guess I'll just never know. So yeah, there you go. Die Hard 5, Good Day to Die Hard.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
All right, so now we're gonna go. Did you like that? That felt really, AM or FM morning DJ. So now we're gonna move on to the next one, and this is where, now that we have 5 out of the way, we're gonna start talking about these in the order in which I saw them, which is definitely not the correct story order. So up next, we are going to talk about, and I actually didn't find out until doing the research for this one, that this is not like the official title. It was one of those, they put the title on later on down the road. Die Hard 2, Die Harder. I always thought it was Die Harder. I guess that was the tagline that then they just kind of pasted on to the VHS cover, and that was that. So, this was kind of interesting. Why did you see Die Hard 2 before Die Hard? I talked about this in the Terminator one that I did, which is where there are some movies where just like I saw Terminator 2 before I saw the first Terminator. Yeah. That was normal. But what actually happened was I was a child that grew up in kind of in the shadow of the Satanic Panic. So I definitely had a parent that was like, everything that wasn't PG was, had a lot of raised eyebrows, and R-rated movies were just off the table for a long time. Like, even by the time I got, like, I remember when the first Matrix movie came out, I had to like make a PowerPoint presentation why I felt like it was culturally important for me to rent that movie.
I promise there's no witchcraft in this.
It was more just like, I don't think there's room for nudity. I think it got to a certain point where I think that there was a time, and this is so embarrassing, I really hope my mom's not listening to this. I think there was a time that my parents rented Monsters Ball, and I may or may not have put it in the VCR when I thought no one else was home and they hadn't returned it yet. And I think that's what started the whole, like, nah, not gonna happen, which is just such a weird, gross thing to, but when you're a kid, I don't know. This is all getting cut out. Anyways,
no, it's fantastic. I had to watch that scene with my dad and my stepmom, and that, like, maybe it's just my memory. It felt like that sex scene was like 13 minutes long. It's just like, you gotta stop. I love it, but you have to stop. I'll deal with you later, okay? Tonight, maybe. But right now, please. This is what did I do? Oh my God.
So, R-rated movies weren't really a thing. I know a lot of my listeners are like, but you said you saw Terminator 2 at Curtis Randall's 7th birthday party. Indeed, that is true, but saw is a relative term. I think it was one of those things where, like, when you're not supposed to be watching something as a kid, and you kind of turn away and you kind of look around, but you're always kind of like peeping over every now and then. Like, I knew I was supposed to be watching it, and so I can't say that I fully watched Terminator 2 at Curtis's birthday party. I also was scared shitless at the nuclear nightmare part, and I was like, I think this is where I'm going to clock out for this. So, like, when I got into high school, this was the summer of 2001, I think my mom realized, like, I was on the precipice of being, like, that weird kid if she didn't, like, loosen the reins a little bit. So it was just, like, overnight. She was just like, oh, you can rent whatever, like, R-rated, like, as long as it's violence, you can rent whatever R-rated movie you want.
Let me put a qualifier in there.
So it's like, well, all right, let me put back Gia. I guess we're not going to, no bound for me tonight. So she went to, I think, at that point, like, my friends group was changing a little bit, and I think it just kind of came off as like, I don't want my son to, like, not be cool and to, like, be over restricted or whatever. So she actually went and was like, I'm gonna rent some movies for you since you're kind of home. It was summertime. She rented me Terminator 2 and Die Hard 2. Why she chose the sequels to two very prestigious action and not part ones, I will never find out. So that was a very magical day. I watched Terminator 2 fully, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Then I watched Die Hard 2. Not as amazing. I just wasn't super into it. And I think, rewatching Die Hard 2 for this one, it's hard for me to know, and maybe you can shed some light, because it's like, when I watch Die Hard 2, every cop cliche dialogue that there's ever been in any show or movie about you're a loose cannon and we don't need, like, that was this whole movie. And it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, because I don't know, like, is everything I've seen since kind of like rubbing off from this, or is it just like this script is like exactly what those cliches are?
I think honestly, it really is a little from column A and a little from column B. And this is one that I've grown to appreciate as I've gotten older. Weirdly, as a kid, I was not as into Die Hard 2. Now, I think with these first 4 Die Hard movies, 1 and 4 actually, or 1 and 3 pair really well together, which makes sense. It's the same director. I think 2 and 4 pair really well together. This one has a more playful tone compared to 1 and 3. Like John McTiernan's films, they have a gravity to them. They're still having fun, but they're also not fucking around. Rennie Harlin, who directed Die Hard 2, his sensibilities are just a little bit more pop, which is fine. And that's one of the things I've grown to appreciate about the second one. But yeah, I also was not completely like won over by this one as a kid.
I just think, even rewatching it now, it's like, what's the actor's name? Who plays like the general?
William Sadler?
Right. I knew him.
I mean, unlike The Matrix, there is room for nudity in this movie. And has there ever been a better villain introduction than naked karate?
The naked, like, Taibo or whatever he's doing. Like, is this what you've been hiding from me? But after that in Terminator, it's like, maybe there's just like naked ass is just like a normal thing in action movies. Like male ass is just what you do in a great action film.
You have to check that box.
I knew him from not the Elton John one, but the OG Fred Randall Goes to Mars Rocket Man, the Disney comedy, which is hysterical even as an adult. Go back and watch it. It's great. So it was no, it is. It's legitimately funny.
I'm just kidding.
It's like I watched Good Burger like a year ago. I was like, I don't know if this is really actually funny or not. I can't tell because I was laughing a lot. Same with Rocket Man. Rocket Man, I think, is pretty funny. So at first it was like a little bit of like, oh, I know this actor. And then I was like, oh, there's his ass. This is going to be a different movie. But again, like his character was just kind of like there. This movie to me, especially after you go back and you watch the first one, like it just feels like, okay, we have a structure now. And we're just going to check these beats off the list one by one. And whereas like the claustrophobia of being in this Nakatomi Plaza building in the first one is kind of the gimmick, this one feels like the claustrophobia of just kind of being in this one setting of like the airport and like this weird church. Like it came off to me more as cheap the second time around than it did as like part of the gimmick. Like I just felt as like this movie's so contained, it almost feels like a weird like bottle episode of Die Hard. And I just like at this point, like I don't want to do that again. I want to like let's stretch out a little bit, and this just wasn't it for me.
I don't know. I see because one of the things people point to with the first 2 movies when they're talking about how this franchise has evolved is that this is one of the essential ingredients is that contained thriller aspect of it. And for me, it's like, even though I can appreciate the contained setting of the airport, it doesn't have the same claustrophobic feel to me that the first one does. It's already getting bigger. And the original Die Hard, it's such a great counterpoint to some of the more bombastic 80s action movies, which I love, by the way. But I like that Die Hard was carving out its own space. It wasn't Cobra or Commando, where this guy was the best of the best. Like McClane wasn't sure he was even up to this. And there was even a little bit of like, oh, if this is really all on me, I think we might all be screwed. And you're already starting to lose some of that in Die Hard 2. He still looks and talks like an everyman for the most part, but we're beginning to steer more into John McClane super cop territory, even this early in the franchise. And the fact that this one was fast-tracked and assembled so quickly, it's kind of a miracle that it's even watchable, let alone pretty good. And I do think Die Hard 2 is pretty good, but it's also definitely in the mold of sequels that takes what worked the first time and then just amplifies it. The action gets bigger, the quips get quippier, the body count quadruples. I actually kind of had the opposite feel with this one, that it's already steering a little bit too much into excess for me. And also, the the thing about the villain, that to me is the big letdown of Die Hard 2, is that, and it's particularly unforgivable because it's William Sadler. And I actually feel the same way about Live Free or Die Hard, where this is one of the reasons I think they pair well. Tonally, I think they're pretty close. Like they're simpatico, but also the villains just don't pop the way you want them to in a Die Hard movie. 1 and 3, you've got Alan Rickman and Jeremy Irons. And in 2 and 4, tremendous actors. William Sadler, Timothy Olyphant, Raylan Givens, for God's sake. And it's just like, how did you manage to turn them into such dull... It's just, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy how underutilized both of them feel in these Die Hard sequels.
I think for me, the other thing with Die Hard 2 is like when you watch the first Die Hard, there's a very clear character with John McClane. He's going through something with Holly, and I think that's kind of the anchor of what makes John McClane more of like, everyone's like, well, he's just an everyman in the first one. I'm like, I just firmly disagree. I think that the John McClane is a superhero is in the first one, and maybe it's just gotten so ridiculous that it's hard to pare it back, but it's like, that is not an everyman. It's just not. I don't buy it. But what I do buy is that what he's going through at home is everyman, and that tethers to him, and it makes it such a more relatable situation for me. When you get to Die Hard 2, they just expect that you just know John McClane, and it's like, you're not here to learn anything new about John, because I don't learn anything new about John in the second one. John is just a guy who's going through a mission, and then once the mission is over, he's just going to go home again. And I think that's what kind of makes it a lot less interesting to me.
That's a great point, but I have to say that in regards to the everyman thing in the original, I think the reason it gets described that way is you do have to put it in context with the type of action movies that were coming out. And I think compared to the Schwarzeneggers and the Stallones, McClane was in pretty stark contrast to that. And I think even though the action escalates and a lot of what he does in that movie is, you could describe as superhuman, it's the vulnerability from the moment we're introduced to him in that movie. It's a moment of vulnerability. It's a guy who's afraid to fly. And the movie goes out of its way to show that, like, when he crashes through a pane of glass, he doesn't get up and shake it off. He's not invincible. That it hurts. You feel it hurt throughout the whole movie. When he shows up at the end, that last face-off with Hans, where it's such an incredible shot when he just comes stumbling in, like his silhouette, and then he steps forward, just covered in blood and dirt and debris, and it looks like he's barely holding himself together. Like, it's just this incredible moment that, like, the physicality of that, okay, look, it's still an action movie, so he's going to be doing things normal people don't do. Who the hell wants to see that movie, by the way? Like, if any of us is in Die Hard and it's just like, we're just crouched in a corner, like, I hope the cops show up. Oh, they didn't? Damn. Roll credits. But like, the fact that you see what the toll these events took on him, that was different. That was something that really set these movies apart. But I do agree that right here, as early as the second film, we're already starting to lose some of that. And the thing that stood out to me this time was the one-liners and the quips. And it's not that the first movie doesn't have those. It does. But I think the big difference is they feel less like a sitcom zinger, the way that they kind of start to in some of the sequels. And in the original, it's like he's doing it for the sake of his own sanity. Like to keep himself from being totally overwhelmed by this situation. There's just something more self-effacing about it in the first one. And to me, it ties into this whole idea of vulnerability. Big component that, yeah, I think we've kind of lost it in the second one.
I mean, it also has an egregious lack of Reginald Bell Johnson. Like, if you're not going to use him other than to eat a Twinkie, then just don't use him. Don't do that to me.
I know. I do appreciate the cameo, and I understand that it's like he's an LA cop.
How can you call that a cameo if he's like third build in the movie?
Well, he's got a great agent, I guess, because that's crazy. Right. But I mean,
he's got that Family Matters pull by that point.
It's weird. It's like even though it wouldn't make sense, I still miss him in the sequels. Like, it's right. I'm still waiting for Powell and Holly to come back.
You're going to be waiting a little.
I know.
I know. Yeah, I think I will say Die Hard 2 has my favorite instance of the yippee-ki-yay motherfucker. Like, it's just so over the top, but I do love the lighter that just gets the gasoline all the way up to the plane.
Oh.
I mean, it's so dumb, but it is my favorite. I can't really defend it, but I like it. That's about all I have to say positively about Die Hard 2.
I remember watching that part of the movie. My stepdad was in the room, the climax of Die Hard 2, and he just started laughing. The scene of that iconic shot of John in the chair is with the explosion, and he rockets right up to the screen.
So bad.
But and my stepdad was just laughing at how over the top it was, and just like, I can't take this seriously. And it's like, buddy, just wait. I don't know if he's ever seen the 4th or 5th Die Hard movies, but if that was a bridge too far for him, buckle up.
Yeah. So Die Hard 2, it kind of put me off of Die Hard. Like, so I watched it and I was like, okay, well, if the restriction on R-rated movies is lifted, Die Hard is not a series that I need to rush and go see right away. There's a lot of other things that I'm more interested in at the time, like those, what is this, Pulp Fiction everyone's been talking about for the last 7 years. I'll see that. So Die Hard 2 was kind of like, that was it for me for a long time. So Die Hard 2.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
So now we're going to fast forward a little bit. I'm now in college. And I'm in film school, but this was a class. I honestly, I racked my brain for the last week trying to think of what class it was, because it was not a film class. It was some sort of psychology or whatever class. And I remember we were reading a book called Hard Bodies, and it was about the kind of the changing of our ideals of what like masculinity was in the Reagan era and later. And one of it was talking about Die Hard. So we watched the first Die Hard in this class. So the first time I saw Die Hard was on a 4:3 tube TV on a cart in the middle of my college class that I was sitting right underneath the air conditioning, and I fell asleep for 2/3 of it. So I had to go home and watch it on my own. And that was the first time that I had seen the first Die Hard. So I would own up to the fact that like the first time and a half that I saw this movie, which was falling asleep in class and then watching it again later at home in preparation for a test, that's a weird thing to say about Die Hard. Not the most ideal way probably to watch this movie. That being said, I think this happens with me a lot, and I think people get frustrated with me, and I don't know any way around it. Whereas like there are these cultural touchstones, these gems that we've all decided are just like untouchable treasures. E.T. being the one that comes to mind, where I was just like, yeah, I saw E.T. like when I was like 27, and I just don't like it. I don't get it. It's not for me. And while I did actually enjoy Die Hard, I think it just had gotten to this point where it's like, if you don't think Die Hard is the greatest action movie ever made, you need to go fuck yourself. And I was just like, I liked it, but I also think that I've gotten to the point where I've seen other movies that have clearly taken this formula and duplicated it. And I'm sorry, there are others that I think did that formula that I just personally enjoy better. You know, there was a whole string of Die Hard on insert the blank that came out after Die Hard. Yeah. And I think just because of, you know, not having seen this in the prime, it did lose something for me. That's not to say I don't like it, but I just don't put it on this untouchable pedestal that I feel like everyone else does.
That's fair. I certainly have movies that I feel the same way about. Die Hard is not one of them. This is another one that I just continue to appreciate more and more as I get older. I do think this is one of the greatest action movies ever made. And I know that when I was a kid, This should have been one of those movies where I saw so many of the imitators first that by the time I finally got around to convincing my dad to rent this for me, to let me see this.
Did you make a PowerPoint presentation?
I did, and and it was just like, there's no room for nudity, which isn't true. There's a quick flash of hoobity boobities in the first Die Hard, but it really made an impression on me. I was really knocked out by it. And I know some of the most striking things in it for me as a kid was just the idea that your hero was barefoot throughout the whole movie. Again, just another thing that makes this guy feel so vulnerable. That really made an impression on me. That felt so different. And the bad guys knowingly exploiting that, shooting out all the glass so he has to run across it. I had never seen anything like that. And the scene where McClane runs into Hans and Hans Gruber is pretending to be Bill Clay. I mean, look, I was a child. I hadn't seen a ton of movies, but that was another moment where I was just like, I've never seen anything like this in a movie before. And I still, when I watch it now, I think that film escalates so perfectly. The structure is so ironclad. Every aspect of it feels like it's firing on all cylinders. And so even though I know this is, of course, all entirely subjective, saying the original Die Hard is the best one in the series, that's like a no-brainer for me personally. But then also, like I said, also one of the greatest action movies of all time. I mean, that feels like, subjective or not, that's something that feels as close to being indisputable when we're talking about movies as it gets. I think top to bottom, Die Hard is a revelation. And if it's been diluted to any degree, that it's, like you said, it's only because of how many other movies have ripped it off for the last 30 years. But even seeing something like Speed, which is Die Hard on a bus, and Speed, another one of the all-time greats in action movies, I saw that first. That should have made Die Hard less potent. Not at all. I'm so blown away by that movie. And you know what else it is too? I think because for me, everything always comes back to character. And John McClane in the original Die Hard, that character, it's the one that feels most like a three-dimensional, fully formed person to me. I love his flaws. I love the relationship with Holly. I think the screenwriter William Wisher described it as, John McClane is a guy who is great at his job and just terrible at his relationships. And even it's like one of those movies where on all of these subsequent viewings, these things that it's like I've seen the movie a dozen times, and then on that 13th viewing, I'll notice, oh shit, the way he takes out Hans, that moment where he unsnaps the watch, and it's like, that's not just a clever thing to do for story reasons. If you go back and remember what Ellis said about why Holly was gifted that watch, what that represents, and then what the undoing of it means in that final moment. Oh my gosh, the movie is loaded with stuff like that. And it's so smart. And a lot of the character stuff is really subtle. I think it's a masterpiece.
We're a little far apart on that. Like I want to wax poetic about this. I want to love it as much. And I think that's why I do watch it fairly. Like, I feel like I watch Die Hard like maybe every other year or so, because it's like maybe this is the time where I'll go from like, I really enjoyed that to like loving it. And I just can't quite get to that point. I think part of it for me is I do think that it goes just a hair too long. I think that after a while, like, I just get fatigued from it. And I think part of the fatigue from it is just like, this is going to sound like I'm like very conservative about it, which I'm really not, but it's just like the violence in this movie is like mind numbing after a while. Like, it just gets like just loud. Like, at a certain point, I'm just like, I want to just like, let's just get to it. And I kind of think that this movie I understand that like what's kind of neat about Hans Gruber is like, you think that this is kind of like this like Air Force One type situation where it's like this political kind of, thing, and there's a lot more to it. And really, he's just a guy he's just a thief. He's just has a pretty damn good plan to steal this stuff. And it's just like, I don't know. I think that combined with just like the mind-numbing violence, I'm like, this just feels like it's masquerading as something a little bit more poignant than it actually is at times. Oh, I just saw your eyes lit up.
No, like not in a how dare you kind of way. Just no, I'm genuinely shocked. I feel the lack of, it just doesn't feel like a pretentious sort of film to me at all. In fact, that's one of the things I kind of like about Hans Gruber as a villain. And
don't get me wrong, I think 99.9% of the people are in your camp. I'm just saying, like, as someone who watched it, who, in his 20s at this point, who just kind of had no taste for it. It just kind of was like, I was just like, I guess I was expecting, maybe it was just purely my expectations of what this was. It was like, this just boils down to like kind of simple cops and robbers for me. And I just kind of thought there was more to it, but I guess not,
Well, I mean, okay, so in a lot of the other 80s action movies, it's not just the infallible hero, the best of the best, invincible action hero that McClane is in such stark contrast to, but also, in a lot of that stuff, there's not a tremendous amount of consideration and thought going into the bad guys a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. Hans Gruber is a villain that very much like created a brand new paradigm for these types of films moving forward. And this is another little detail I love, that when he's standing in front of all the models, and he bends down to appreciate one and talks about how he used to build models when he was a kid, and how, this exacting attention to detail that he had, he considered every little part of it. And it's just like, he's telling you who he is in that moment. That's his plan for what's going to happen this night. That's the kind of bad guy he is. That was different. To have someone that was that calculated and cunning and competent. That was something else about this movie that just, it felt different. And like, you don't get to Dennis Hopper in Speed without Hans Gruber. And so, yeah, from your point of view, I understand. This is one of those situations where when you've seen all of the stuff that has ripped it off or, taken this and run with it, and it's evolved into this other thing, that you've seen a bunch of that stuff first, that then going back to the source, there is a little bit of like, I guess I can appreciate it for what it did. It just isn't making that impact.
It's
on
a
me.
little bit, this is so weird to say, but it's like a little bit with the Citizen Kane thing, where it's like, I understand watching that movie, how much, we took from that and the barriers it broke. I don't particularly find Citizen Kane that interesting of a movie. I certainly like Die Hard a lot more than I like Citizen Kane. But I think part of it too is just like, what?
No, I'm sorry. No, I couldn't have guessed that, like, oh, okay. And then, so I'm going to go on Billy's show, and this is the episode where I defend Die Hard and Citizen Kane.
Yep. I'm just saying, I'm trying to give a frame of reference. I also think too, like, the other thing that just really bothers me, and it's funny because after I saw this movie this last time, I think I watched this maybe a month or so ago in preparation for this, I just want to be like, does anyone else just like not like, or does anyone else like dislike this? Because I think it's tough, because I think the people are going to walk away from this thinking I don't like Die Hard. I do. I really like Die Hard. I don't love it as much as everyone else does.
Yeah,
it's like a solid B+ for me, but might as well just kill myself according to a lot of people. But I wanted to go see.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think even though I don't agree with you, I think this is the nice thing about this is, look, even if it's not Die Hard, even the people that have their knives out for you right now, like,
right,
we all have a version of this.
Right. There's
so
something.
I understand, even if I don't agree about Die Hard, I know the feeling. So it's all good.
So after watching this, I wanted to be like, well, I want to kind of read the negative reviews of this movie, just because I want to see if like anyone aligns with me, or if there's something that maybe like, just out of sheer curiosity. And I was surprised to see that Roger Ebert gave this a negative review, and he said something that actually really was like, yeah, that part did really bother me, where he's like, look, this movie's fine, I liked it well enough, but the thing that absolutely kills it is the police chief that comes on the ground and like basically undercuts Carl Winslow. The whole movie is just like, he's just so obnoxious for no other reason that the story just needs more obstacles on the ground. That it's just like, that to me is kind of indicative of what some of the story is, which is just like, it's there because it has to be there in order for it, which sounds so like, well, obviously your hero needs obstacles or it's not a movie, but it's just like, it just felt so patently like, we need something here, so I guess I'm just going to disagree with you every step of the way for no reason. Why do you disagree? Why is this a bad plan? Why are you chief if everything you say is wrong every single time? Like, I think that's what kind of like, even though I maybe don't 100% agree or feel as strongly about it as Ebert did, I did kind of sympathize with the fact that it's like, yeah, it just kind of feels like the longer that this movie goes on, for me, the less tense I feel. The tension I feel in the first hour and change of this movie, by the end, I think it's just like, I'm now to the, like, my quote unquote, like, third act, you know, that I'm just like, all right, let's just wrap this up. Let's just get out of here.
That actor, gosh, Paul Vernon, is that his name? I'm embarrassed. I'm blanking on this. He was in The Breakfast Club.
Right. He's a very punchable face.
It's not Paul Vernon. People are screaming.
It's Paul Gleason, right?
Paul Gleason. That's okay. Yeah. And it does just feel like there were a lot of films where he just showed up to play the same character.
He moonlights as a police chief when he's not being a principal.
Know where he is. He wandered over from a different soundstage, grabs a bullhorn.
I'm half convinced that they were filming the pilot for Family Matters, and they were like, we need a cop. Oh, there's one on the shooting a TV show. Just bring him over here, because it's either that or my theory that after this movie, the terrorists made a threat towards Al Powell, and he went into witness protection and changed his name to Carl Winslow and moved to Chicago.
I think you'd be shocked how many people have that exact theory. And I do think it was this, I can't remember the exact story, but definitely the success of Die Hard is semi-responsible for Family Matters. There's
a headline.
I think that's true.
Did I yippee-ki-yay that? How Die Hard influenced. But look, long story short, I'm not going to try to knock this off the pedestal. I think everyone that talks so fondly of this is 100% in the right. I just don't feel like, you know, this is not a desert island movie for me. I think even if I'm in the mood for an action movie, this isn't the one that I go to, but I don't dislike it. But I think I'm hoping that by telling these weird stories of why I saw these out of order maybe contributes a little bit to know, the way that I feel about them. Yeah. So that's what I have to say about Die Hard.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
So now we're going to move to 1995's Die Hard with a Vengeance. This is Die Hard 3. For a while, this was my favorite out of all of them. So I saw this in 2007. Live Free or Die Hard was a couple months away from coming out, and I was like, you know what? I that one does look good, and I do want to see it. I have foggy memories of part 2 at this point, and I was like, yeah, I could stand to watch part 1 again. So I did a marathon, and by the time we got to part 3, I was like, oh, this is my jam. I like this one. And I think, you know, even rewatching these again, there's something about Die Hard with a Vengeance that it's tough, because I really like Die Hard 4 too, but this was the one that's like, I like the fact that you know, as I just said, out of like Die Hard 2, we finally get to stretch out a little bit. I've seen John McClane in the claustrophobic setting, so let's get out a little bit more. Let's expand it a little bit. 2, we get to actually get out of LA. Let's go somewhere different. Now we're going back to his home turf in New York. That's pretty cool. And 3, I love that it doesn't always work. In fact, it's a real crapshoot. But taking a character that's known as kind of a singles guy and putting him in a tag team doesn't always work. But I think it really worked well here, because Zeus, Samuel L. Jackson, was able to bring a dynamic that really in my opinion, complemented McClane's character. Stuff that McClane just wasn't capable of, but Zeus was, kind of opens you up to be able to do more things, where you kind of have this, like, it's almost like they're going after the Riddler in New York, which I just really loved.
So that was like the first note I made, was because I know that John McTiernan was offered the chance to direct the third Batman movie, turned it down to do this instead. And what I was so struck by rewatching it was, oh my gosh, this is how you do the Riddler in a movie. Like Simon's character in this, especially how he's just the voice on a telephone throughout the first half. And then you find out all of this stuff he has you running around doing is just a distraction to keep you occupied from this other thing he's actually doing. That feels so Riddler-esque. And then you could even do like, oh, and then one of the traps that doesn't go right, one of the puzzles they don't solve, that's the accident that turns Harvey Dent into Two-Face. That was just totally running through my head the entire time with this. So I agree with that. And I also, as far as Zeus goes, I think there are pros and cons to this decision to give McClane a sidekick, because yeah, this is something that definitely helps distinguish this one from the first two Die Hard movies. I do think it's unfortunate that it then becomes a prerequisite from this point on. If anything, I wouldn't have minded if they had found a couple of more times to separate McClane and Zeus in this one, even as they're working together. And then, yeah, in the other sequels, the way it's just like, and now he's always got a sidekick or a partner. I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about that.
But I get that. But I also, like, if you're just looking at this movie in a vacuum, it's not like, you can hold that against it. Although you're your own person, you have agency, you can hold whatever you want against whatever you want.
I mean, the other thing, I think there are a lot of Die Hard fans that would agree with you that this is their favorite Die Hard movie. And I think the age you are when you see these at, and the order you see them in, like you said, that really makes a huge difference. This one, I think, gosh, it's like, I always feel like I don't love this one as much as everybody else does. And then when I rewatched it for the podcast, the first half of this, I was like, this is pretty perfect. This is like everything I would want in a Die Hard sequel. I forgot how awesome this one is. And then it's that damn second half where I think the movie gets a little clunky and it starts tripping over itself. It's the second act that prevents me from being able to say this is definitively my second favorite Die Hard movie. But the first half of this, oh my gosh, it's so perfect. And that actually reminds me of the crazy origin story of this one, where it was a spec script called Simon Says. It was originally intended as a Brandon Lee vehicle. And then, with what happened with him on The Crow, that obviously that never materialized. In the original version, Samuel L. Jackson's character was a female. But other than that, the screenwriter said, other than like changing some of the names, the first half of the script is almost exactly what he wrote in that original version. And I know Warner Brothers actually had their hands on this script first, and they were trying to make it as the fourth Lethal Weapon movie. And at that point, Mel Gibson was like, I'm just not up for one of these again at the moment. So then it was sold to Fox, who gave it to Willis, who had been rejecting pitches for a third Die Hard movie left and right, and then read this one and was like, okay, thumbs up. This one works. This one's a go. So it's just... It just reminds me that like the first half feeling so perfect is like, well, yeah, I mean, that's the part that's left over from the original script. That's the most organic portion of it. But yeah, I think the back half, it just gets a little unwieldy.
I don't disagree. I also think, like, at this point for me, like, I've kind of accepted the fact that this series shifts from quote unquote the everyman to like John McClane kind of just being another kind of action hero. And I think maybe from this point on, I think I cut it slack, certainly in the next one, where it just goes full banana pants, like almost right out the gate. But the thing that I do like about John McClane in this movie is, like, we start the movie and he's been kicked down to his, I'm not going to say rock bottom, but he's certainly like, I think maybe that's kind of what I needed from Die Hard 2 was a little bit like, he just felt status quo. Everything was fine with Holly, and he's just, I guess while I'm hanging out waiting for her, this thing happened. When we get to Die Hard 3, I like that some history has happened off screen, and when we meet him, we're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, why are you back in New York? Where is Holly? I'm not talking to her. It's like, I really like all that, and I think that's... God, I really hate myself that I'm going here. But I think that they did the same thing really well in Captain America Civil War with Tony, where when we started, like, Tony's in a little bit of a darker place. Pepper's left him, and we didn't see it happen, but it kind of sets the stage of, like, anything that happens in this movie, we already know Tony's a word that you've used already, vulnerable. And I feel like John McClane starts this one vulnerable, and I think that's what made me more interested again in him as a character, was that they gave him a character in this one. He didn't have one in the last one. It was just Bruce Willis with, like, kind of, I'm not gonna say sleepwalking, because he does sleepwalk in other movies. It's not Die Hard 2. But I felt like he actually had something to do in this movie that kind of was new, was fresh. And I really liked that. And whether or not that would have been with a sidekick, I don't know. I just feel like Samuel L. Jackson at this point is just like he was on a hot streak. He was in like Jurassic Park, and Pulp Fiction had come out, and Jackie Brown was just around the corner, and like 1,000,005 other movies that he was in around this time. So I really like this one. I think kind of like this also has like a really fun reveal that is the brother of Hans Gruber, which was just kind of like something, again, another weird comparison I'm going to make, but this to me feels very much like Ocean's 13 is to Ocean's 11 as Die Hard with a Vengeance is to Die Hard, where that second one, whether or not you agree with it, maybe feels like a little bit of a misstep. So let's kind of do what maybe should have been the direct sequel, which is this one.
A lot of third movies do this. It's the second sequel where they go back and connect to events of the first one, whether the second one was well received or not. A lot of third films have this temptation, but I think that's a great point, and I do think John McTiernan seems to be the director that really understands who John McClane is, because, like I said, 1 and 3 pair really well together. This is the closest McClane feels to being the same character he was in the first movie. This feels like a logical extension of that guy, to the point where I like Die Hard 2. You could skip it. You could go straight from Die Hard to With a Vengeance, and it tracks. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I loved about it when it started, was that I had forgotten, was just the position that McClane starts the movie in, and it's just so wild to consider it was this other thing that they grafted Die Hard onto. And I know a lot of the Die Hard movies they weren't explicitly Die Hard projects initially, but I'm saying in this one particularly, the fact that we're dealing with an original screenplay that they were just like, delete, 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 John. and it works this well.
I mean, that's kind of, I guess, why I equate it to Ocean's 11 too, is because, again, those sequels, or at least the second one, was also not an Ocean's 11 movie. They're like, delete, 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 Danny Ocean,
Right. I
I
know you did a whole episode about it, but I like Ocean's 12. I like those movies are all fun in their own way, but that's
Carlos and I had the
comparison.
same opinion. We both think it's fun, and to a certain extent, I kind of feel the same way about Die Hard. Although I'd much rather watch Ocean's 12 than Die Hard 2. That's just me. Die Hard 3 also, I remember more from, there was at the time like a PlayStation video game. And I remember, Die Hard with a Vengeance being like my favorite part. Because I think it went through like the 3 different Die Hards, right?
Die Hard trilogy. That's what it was called.
Yeah. And I happen to really like the Die Hard with a Vengeance parts of it too.
Yeah,
I don't have anything to add other than just like, it was a fun game, That's like, there's certain games where it's just like the game is so bad that it almost makes me not like the movie. But then other way around, like, I think GoldenEye is fine, but that game makes me like the movie more just because I like the game so much. Maybe that's part of it too. I just had fond memories of that Die Hard game before I even saw the movies.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people around my age, the third one was the one they saw first, or I mean, maybe even just as common that like it's the first Die Hard movie a lot of people saw in the theater. These things, they do make a big difference.
Which is interesting because this is the third Die Hard movie, and a lot of people probably my age, the first one they see in a theater, and they have a special connection to it. Similarly, just a month later, Batman Forever being the third Batman movie. And it's just like, we've had this discussion off the air, like, there's just nothing you can say that makes me not love that movie for those reasons. I've never tried. You know?
You're the one that keeps bringing this up.
Fight me, bro!
I'm fine to just let you have it. And I was like, if this motherfucker brings up Batman Forever, I am disconnecting the call. I can't do this anymore. I'm fine with you liking it. But no, this is...
I'm just going to start sending the little McDonald's glasses to your house.
I already own them all. But your point is well taken in that, yeah, this is... I totally understand this, that... Because for me, it's Batman 89. For you, it's Batman Forever. And it is one of those things where just that slight age difference between us makes all the difference. And I think there's like a pretty even split in our generation and their relationship to the Die Hard movies for this reason. I think this is why 3 tops the list for a lot of people. And I do understand that.
So I was trying to find it before. So I know, shake your head. I actually don't. I used to have these on DVD. I think I got rid of them like a long time ago. So it's like a lot of streaming. And I was trying to find, I remember on the Die Hard with a Vengeance DVD when I had it, there was like an alternate ending deleted scene. Yeah. And I was trying to find it online to rewatch it, and I could not find it anywhere. But I do remember it was like, somehow like McClane gets blamed for everything and he gets like fired. That's like the only part that I remember.
It's a lot of ground it covers very quickly. It does not work. It's a really terrible ending where he loses his job, and he winds up obsessively tracking Simon. They wind up in this cafe where McClane has like a little rocket launcher, and they're going to do this version of like Russian roulette where they don't know which end of the rocket is going to fire. And then it's Simon he blows himself up. The reveal is that McClane was wearing a flak jacket, so no matter what, he would have survived. But not only does it feel like a weird epilogue to the film, just for pacing reasons, it feels like you've had your big climax and then they tack this little short film onto the end. It just doesn't work for that reason. But the other thing, I think one of the producers very keenly realized there is a big difference to John McClane being on the defensive and John McClane being out for revenge and this sort of like bloodthirsty. This just doesn't feel like the same guy. This doesn't feel right for the character. And that's huge. Like that was a great decision great expense to go back and shoot a new ending. And the ending still feels a little abrupt and slightly unsatisfying to me, but it is much better than that original one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like Jurassic Park 3 abrupt, but I do understand that it just feels a little bit like Jurassic Park 3 is like, oh, if it's that easy to just have the army show up, these movies should be over in 10 minutes.
That was exactly the feeling. The lights came up in the theater, and we all were like turning to each other like, that's it? That was on purpose? We're done. Oh, okay. Well, hey, shit. Got time to get dinner.
Oh, I booked out 2 hours to go see this.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't quite feel Jurassic Park 3'd, but I definitely, I get what you're saying. The ending does feel a little bit, I don't want to say made by committee, but it definitely feels like I can feel the brainstorm in this ending, you know? I could feel like, let's take the best of these 3 pitches in the room and see if we can make something out of it. And that's okay. I think by the end of that movie, like, I already got my jollies, so I'm just like, that's sure, you know, I'm there. Die Hard with a Vengeance. Up until this next one, that was my favorite.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
So now we get to, by the way, that is amusing nobody but me, and I'm just so glad that I clipped that out. So we now get to
I love that I get muted every time. I don't have a choice. I have to go.
You have to listen to it. Yeah. That's like StreamYard is just like, fuck you if you're going to play something.
The software is making a very big deal of letting me know, like, hey, your mic is muted. Don't even.
You're like, nah, it cut off. So, Live Free or Die Hard, or as you said, depending on where you live, Die Hard 4.0. This one is again, like, I kind of was shocked that I can kind of track these big things in my life by like Die Hard, because this is not a series I think of as like a kind of a focal point of my life, because it's not. But when I think about like where I was with Live Free or Die Hard, so, you know, I had just watched these movies in preparation for Live Free or Die Hard. It was coming out in, I believe it was July. It definitely was the summer. And in May, I had an accident, and I sliced my Achilles tendon in half from the outside with a piece of metal. Just like a mob injury. Like, it took me obviously off my feet, no pun intended, for the rest of the summer. And I was, so I had a surgery, and that wasn't doing too hot. They messed up, so they had to do another one to kind of go back in and do another thing. So when I found out I had the second surgery, I was like really bummed. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I'd been on crutches, and it was just awful. Couldn't really walk. And I remember I just didn't, like, this was coming out. I was like, I just wasn't into it. I didn't really feel, I was like, I don't really want to, like, you know, crutch my ass up to the theater. And, you know, I'm just kind of like feeling sorry for myself, and was just kind of in a bad state. And then I remember getting the news that they needed to do another one, and I was driving home, and I was just like, I don't want to go home, because when I go home, I literally have to like crawl around on the floor, because I live by myself, and it's like to get anything done, I just have to crawl on the floor, and I'm just like, feel way too sorry for myself to be that depressing, just like rolling around on the floor. So it's like, I'm just going to go to the movies. I'll see this movie. I don't know. Maybe it will make me feel anything other than sorry for myself. And at the time, now this is like commonplace. You actually have to go out of your way to find the opposite of it. But at the time, this was the first movie in the area that I was living in that was showing a digital projection of this. There was no 35 millimeter. And I was like, okay, I guess that's like, I kind of want to see what this is all about, what a digital projection is. I'll see this stupid movie. And it literally just like put a smile on my face for 2 hours. And I just had such like a positive, fun time on such like a day where I was just feeling so sorry for myself and shitty, that I really, really enjoyed this movie. And again, like, I don't know if I can quite pull out my critical side versus like the emotional side of how this makes me feel. But the fact of the matter is, if movies are just a form of like entertainment and making you feel something, like, this made me feel not sorry for myself for the afternoon that I watched it, and I really enjoyed it.
So I'm going to wind up in a very similar place to you, but I'm starting from a very different place. The day I saw this was such a great day. My legs were working so well, Billy. They felt so good. And I just skipped into
You just ran to the theater. You jogged.
But I mean, if you want to talk about red flags, going into this, there was that whole, the controversy about like, oh, it's going to be rated PG-13. Like, what? And the director, it was the guy that made the Underworld movies. I just had never been a big fan of anything he'd done. It just felt like such a strange choice. So I just went into this with very, very low expectations. And the thing is, I associate all of these movies with my dad, not just because he's been with me when I've seen most of them, but there's also just a lot about John McClane that reminds me of my dad. And when I was a little kid, my dad was my hero, and so much of who I am and what I'm interested in and passionate about, it's because of him. But unfortunately, the older I got, the more he and I started to drift apart. And without getting too deep into that, because who cares, I'll just sum it up by saying that in my adult life, I can count on one hand the number of really good days I've spent with my father. And the day we saw Live Free or Die Hard was one of them. So it's impossible for me not to think about that when I watch the movie, because it was the capper to what was probably the best day I've spent with my dad since I was a kid. And I remember walking out of the theater with him. We're both just on such a high, and we both really liked the movie, and way more than we had expected to. And in fact, he even said, well, that was the best of the diehards. And I was like, Dad, no. And he kept
Sit
arguing.
with it for a minute.
He kept arguing this point with me. I was like, do you have early onset dementia? Should I be concerned? You don't remember the other one, I guess. So I loved it too. But I mean, at that point, I wasn't even sure.
Twist ending. He ended up with my ex-girlfriend. That's who he's with now.
Every Valentine's Day, they recreate this. But yeah, I mean, what I want to acknowledge here is kind of the same thing you did, which is that because of these positive associations I have with the film, that probably bumps it up at least like a full letter grade for me. I'm not sure I can be as objective about this one as some of the other Die Hard movies. So yeah, I also really, really like this one, even though I understand a lot of the criticisms about, John McClane goes full superhero and it's just like, this doesn't feel like the same guy anymore. And it's too big of a story with it's not the off-duty cop who winds up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now suddenly John McClane is like the only guy who's going to save the country. Like I get all of that. I really do. But I think this is just such an entertaining action movie and really well made. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the recent Star Trek movies and how people feel about those. And that I really like the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie. I think that's a really fun film. But as somebody who has like a really strong connection to Star Trek, that, I mean, it means more to me than just, oh yeah, it was a show I liked when I was a kid. I do understand the Star Trek fans that feel like, I don't want Star Trek to be Star Wars. I already have Star Wars. I want Star Trek to honor the things about it that make it different from all of that. And I do get that how, even though I don't think the difference is as dramatic in the Die Hard series, I do understand that sentiment that like we have a lot of overblown action movies like this. We don't need this from Die Hard. I want Die Hard to be Die Hard. And what's so crazy is like, on the one hand, I actually do really love this movie. I mean, this is, like I said, this is what kicked off this whole episode, was that we both feel like this is a pretty underrated film. And, but then on the other hand, there's also a part of me that feels like the best Die Hard sequels aren't Die Hard movies. I'm talking about movies Bruce Willis has made. 16 Blocks is the best Die Hard sequel, and it's not a Die Hard movie. But like, I mean, straight up, it is. And so I get it. I get why people feel the way they do about this one, even if I can't help but just be really happy every time I watch it.
It's funny to me because it's like, well, first of all, I agree. If this was just called Live Free or Die and it had nothing to do with Die Hard, I think more people would have opened up their arms and accepted it. But I also feel like, especially if you sit down and really watch these movies like in order, like if you kind of do a marathon, like it doesn't quite feel as unearned as you maybe think it does by the time we get to 4 to get that crazy. Like, they've been feeding us a steady diet of bullshit for the last couple of movies that it doesn't feel... I say the same thing about Indiana Jones, and I know I'm never going to win that fight with anybody, but it's just like by the time we get to Crystal Skull, some of the things that really stick in people's craws are not as ridiculous as maybe you think on an isolated incident, because we've been fed a lot of this stuff. It goes from zero to crazy town, like by the time that we're all done. And I kind of feel the same way with Die Hard. Now, by this point with Live Free or Die Hard, we were talking about in the last one that you're kind of like, why do we always have to be saddled with someone? One of the things that I do like about this, and even I'll give credit to A Good Day to Die Hard, even though that movie has nothing going for it, is that at least the setup for why he has someone with him is at least somewhat unique. This is like, this is essentially he's taking someone into custody that ends up like he has to work with, which I think is different enough from just like, something that I don't in the other one, or you're just kind of tagging along. It kind of ends up being the same thing in this one, but I kind of like that Justin Long's character is normally someone that McClane would be arresting. I mean, he goes to arrest him. I like that he's kind of on the wrong side of the law in this one. I also firmly disagree with you that Timothy Olyphant is not a memorable villain in this one, because I think that's part of I think his charm and charisma and kind of his cold calculation is what made him really believable in this one. I believe that this guy was probably thinks that he's so smart that he needs to punish people for not being as smart as he is about it.
I think Timothy Olyphant looks like he does not want to be there, and just it really.
But that's his face. He has I don't want to be her face.
No. That's a guy who can't help but be charming, even when he's playing total sons of bitches. This is something that is unforgivable to me about Live Free or Die Hard, and it's crazy that he's an actor I love that much could be my least favorite part of this movie, but he is. And some of it, I mean, not some of it, a lot of it is the performance. He just doesn't feel particularly invested in this, but a lot of it is also in the writing. I mean, there's just a big difference between Hans Gruber, and even if you're going to have a stoic villain like William Sadler in Die Hard 2, the difference between that sort of stoic badass and then Timothy Olyphant, I'm sorry, there is just nothing threatening or cool about lines like, prep the video package. Oh shit, look out everybody. And I get that it's a different kind of villain. I'm just saying, like, he's just unforgivably bland to me. I do like Justin Long though, and this is another thing that I think a lot of people don't like in the film. They think he's really, really irritating. I just in general, I don't have a problem with Justin Long, and I like that it is a different dynamic than the previous partner. And like, I do think there's a lot of good stuff to be mined from all of that. I just, one of the things I like about the second movie is that even though we don't get Sergeant Powell, McClane does partner up with various allies throughout the film, but that's the thing. It's like, it's not just one that they attach to him. It's like he meets up with this guy who gets him from this point to this point, and now this guy's gonna work with him for this part of the movie. And all of these people are there in the background, and they're doing their thing, and McClane's kind of weaving in and out of their stories. And I don't know, that feels like the right way to handle that sort of thing, as opposed to just, nope, this is the sidekick for this movie, start to finish. Because I think particularly in 4 and 5, what you wind up with sometimes is a story where McClane doesn't get to be very proactive, because we know we're going to see a Die Hard movie. We know John McClane is the main character, but the plot of the movie is actually saying it's actually this other person's story, and McClane is just along for the ride. And I think this is a much bigger problem in the 5th one, where he just accidentally shows up into his son's movie. But in the 4th one, there are stretches of it where it kind of becomes Justin Long's, like, his character, Matt, is the one kind of steering the ship here. That just feels kind of weird. And the other thing too is, like, the one really great line Timothy Olyphant has in the movie about, oh, John, you're a Timex watch in a digital age. That is a great line and a great theme. And oh man, do I wish that was actually what the movie was about. And this is the only, so even though I'll go with you on that, like, by this point in the series, the fact that the action's getting bigger and I'm being asked to, that my suspension of disbelief is really being tested, I will go with most of it. More than I think most Die Hard fans are willing to, it seems like. It's just that all of those elements are in contrast to that really great line where it's like, if that had been the action movie we were making, this really could have been something else. But yeah, sorry, that was a whole lot all at once. Let me make like 5 points. But
well, it's funny because my brain can't help itself. It just made another Ocean's 13 connection, because I remembered those movies came out about a month or so apart from each other, if that. And they both had the same line in it, or at least variations, which was in Ocean's 13 says, you're analog players in a digital world. And this was the same thing. And neither of those movies quite own up to such a cool tagline, Well,
it's just, there are a lot of movies now that seem to feel so much more comfortable with leaning into the fact that the lead actor is aging. And I mean, even in overblown action stuff, like Kristen and I just watched the 3rd Bad Boys movie, which is totally over the top and insane. But the whole thing is kind of about how Martin Lawrence has accepted the fact that his best days are behind him, and Will Smith just isn't quite there yet. He's not really ready to let it go. And everyone around him is telling him, you can't do this forever. That's what that whole movie is about. And I think having a Die Hard movie, gosh, it would have really connected it to the first one in such an interesting way to bring it back to, it's just a different kind of vulnerability. And McClane wrestling with who he thinks he is, who he still feels like he is. And then just the fact that you can't just pick yourself up and walk away from situations like a fucking jet shooting missiles at you. You don't just get up and go, I'm like, all right, on to the next thing.
You just drive a car into a helicopter and that's what you do. Like, you can do that at any age. I could probably go do that, right?
I mean, listen, I like the movie. I really, really do. I think it is a very, very entertaining action film. But it's even if, if McClane doesn't quite feel like the same guy anymore. And I can lament the loss of that and enjoy the movie at the same time, weirdly.
I think it's also one of those things where it's just like, I guess, yeah, I'm okay with... Because of the adventures that McClane has had up until this point, I'm kind of okay with like almost embracing the action hero-ness of John McClane. Like, I'm okay with like your superhero status is kind of earned to me at this point. So if you want to do these crazy set pieces, like I don't necessarily like balk at the idea that it's just like, well, this doesn't feel like the same character. I'm like, it kind of does to me in a certain way, but like I also can see, maybe not necessarily for other people, but again, like take the hard out of the title and it's just a cool action movie that I really liked. I think the humor is definitely on point in this one as opposed to maybe some of the other ones. Like, yes, there's quips, but I kind of feel like there's like legitimate like one-liners from Justin Long that maybe kind of hit a little bit better than just kind of the tired old cliches of John McClane. I also really think that it's funny watching Bruce Willis, even if it's kind of like a meta commentary, just kind of like poking fun at the fanboyness of both him, Justin Long, and Kevin Smith. Like, I love that he just walks in and just like breaks his little like toy statue. Like, Bruce Willis is such a freaking cockface that it's like, yeah, that's probably exactly what he would do.
I do love the line when the Warlock refers to his command center. Right. The way he laughs, command center. That's the thing. Okay, so as far as all of the moments, especially with the big action set pieces where you feel like, oh gosh, this is not John McClane. There are so many moments in the fourth film where it does these like almost interstitial stuff that does feel completely like John McClane to me. And in a way where by 2007, we had already seen several, this is what it looks like when Bruce Willis is sleepwalking through a movie. The fact that he didn't do that in this movie, I remember being surprised by the first time I saw it. And there are just moments like he has that ridiculous fight with the dude parkouring all over the place towards the end where the dude that winds up getting chopped up in that fan or whatever.
Yeah.
And after that, right after that dude has this horrific death, the way McClane like just kind of like rolls onto his back laughing like, oh no, like it's such a great reaction. And just like, that feels like John McClane to me. And there are a lot of those little moments still peppered throughout this one.
Yeah. I never really took issue with the fact that this one was PG-13 over R. I get you had to obscure the motherfucker with a gun sound because in that context, fucker is in a sexual connotation. You are a fucker of mothers. So therefore, like that, you can't do that in your one fuck PG-13. But I also was just like, I really thought that sequence was clever. Like the way that he kind of disposes of the bad guy, that I kind of felt like even with the R-rated cut, which does exist, it's out there. I'd be hard pressed to tell you what any other changes there were other than like the fucker is not obscured by a gunshot, but I still kind of like that anyways. I thought that was such like a clever little ending to that movie.
That did not bother me. The PG-13 thing really wound up not bothering me, strangely, when it felt like such a deal breaker going into the film. That was apparently Timothy Oliphant's idea. Not to give it a PG-13 rate. Look, guys,
He's like, guys, I can't be associated with this.
We're selling ourselves. We're leaving money on the table here. Come on. No, the way that McClane kills him at the end, was apparently Oliphant's idea. But I remember Len Wiseman saying, the director, saying that they had they knew Fox wanted them to make this PG-13. He said that didn't affect the way they made the film at all. They decided, we're just going to shoot exactly the film we want to make, and whatever they need to pull back on, that's going to be a problem for post-production. And what's funny is I own the unrated cut, and it feels like the opposite. It feels very much like they made a PG-13 movie. And then when they wanted to do the unrated version, that was a bunch of stuff they added in post-production, including CGI blood and a lot of stuff that just, it doesn't feel like it was there to begin with. So I'm not sure I buy that at all. But it really doesn't irk me.
Also, I think if this movie had come out in like 1997, it probably, as is, the PG-13 cut would be R. Like, it's just, the ratings are relaxed. Like, I watched Air Force One just like a week or so ago, and I was just like, if that came out today, I don't know if that would have been R. It would have been right on the bubble these days. So it's just like, but I'm not one of those people like, I've never understood why people are like, you need an R-rated this, I need this to be R-rated. It's like, the story is the story, and if whatever the rating is, kind of hash it out down the line. I get from a business perspective, that's not how that works, but I don't know. The next one was not PG-13, so maybe they either were like, maybe the fan backlash was not great, or they're just like, I don't know if it really made a difference one way or another how we did this,
I mean, it was the most financially successful Die Hard movie at that point. I believe even adjusted for inflation. I think it still might be.
Then it's very strange to me that they wouldn't make the next one PG-13. Yeah. Or why they would release the next one in February.
It's just, it was all that clout Skip Woods had that he just, those are some of his demands. Look, I'll do it. But
someone out there knows who Skip Woods is. It may be you. There's got to be a great Unsolved Mysteries about Skip Woods. I can't. I still have his picture up on my browser tab right now. I don't know why I didn't close this out an hour ago. He's just staring at me with his stupid Mike Myers grin. I don't know if you saw his Wikipedia photo, but I implore you to go look up Skip
of course
Woods
I did. Yeah, and I tried to do a Google image search, and I even reverse image search to be like, okay, but where did this photo actually come from? Because it is not. What is this?
The other thing about Live Free or Die Hard that I really actually liked, and I was kind of surprised that this was kind of the end of the hot streak, was Maggie Q. She was kind of like Timothy Oliphant's kind of like enforcer, and she was coming off of Mission Impossible 3. She was kind of like, it seemed like she was being poised as kind of maybe like the next big kind of like action kind of star, and then she just kind of, I'm looking at her filmography now, and it just kind of, I guess if you want to call the Divergent series a big thing, but it's just like, I really liked her in this movie. I thought maybe this would launch her into bigger superstar, and it just kind of didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think she wound up doing a lot of stuff in TV eventually.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she did like Nikita, which was on the CW for a while. And then I think she was on Designated Survivor, which I think that's over now. But I remember a lot of people were into that show. But I just thought this was going to be like, when you go from Mission Impossible to a Die Hard, you kind of are setting yourself up to be like, oh, I'm going to be like a woman in action. And when you have stuff coming out like Atomic Blonde and stuff, like, right. I just thought that's kind of where her career path was going to go, and it didn't.
Absolutely. Yeah. Next stop, Fast Five, something.
Yeah, totally.
Something like that.
Yeah. It just didn't happen for her. But I thought she was good. Her and Moon Bloodgood was another one that had like, this was around the time both of them where I thought they were going to be the next big things, and they both just didn't. But I thought she was great in this.
Yeah,
I really liked that fight that she had with McClane in the elevator shaft.
Yeah, and I remember Bruce Willis when the movie came out and they were saying, is there going to be another one? And him saying, I don't know. I mean, if we do, I think the only way to do it is we got to get Len back, got to get Justin back, got to get Maggie back. And I'm like, got to get Bruce, did you see the movie?
you killed her real dead, man. Look, the fact that you saw that interview is just kind of a miracle in itself, that he did a full interview where he spoke real words, because he's not known for that.
No, I think this was maybe one of the special features on the Blu-ray or the DVD. And I think it may actually be the one where he's talking to Kevin Smith. There's like a Kevin Smith, which, I mean, now this is obviously before things soured between them. It's even kind of fascinating just for that reason about, oh, look, when they were friends. But I mean, Kevin Smith has that like really damning story about Bruce Willis, not them working together on Cop Out, but I mean like specifically about Die Hard, where they were standing on set and some fans recognized Bruce Willis and they just shouted out like, yeah, Die Hard. And Kevin Smith said something like, I bet that never gets old, does it? Like, that's got to be so fucking awesome. And apparently Bruce Willis said, it's the ones that scream Die Hard I hate the most. Okay.
I would just like to think that Sir Alec Guinness was the Bruce Willis of his day. It's
Absolutely.
The ones that scream Obi-Wan I hate the most.
Oh man. So also, if you've ever seen that very notorious clip of Bruce Willis, I think it was when they were doing press for Red 2. And there was this poor like British film journalist who was trying to be complimentary about the film. And this went viral because Bruce Willis was such an unbelievable dick to him. And the whole thing about, no, I really liked the film. Oh yeah, you really liked it? When I say like John McClane, Bruce Willis kind of reminds me of my dad. That's me standing in the kitchen with some bullshit excuse about where I've been all night. And that's the tone oh God.
Look, I have my own Bruce Willis Red 2 story that I will tell you off the air, but I get it. It's to the point where it is, and maybe that's, now thinking about it, like it does cast a shadow over everything. Like the same with Chevy Chase. Like I had such a miserable experience, like traumatizing experience on a junket with Chevy Chase, that it like it's hard to separate and watch like the Vacation or something at Christmas time and feel like great about it. And so like I kind of feel like, unfortunately, maybe that's a good day to die hard too. By that point, I was just like, I'm kind of done with this guy too. But I do think, by this point in my life, I didn't know any better. And I really did enjoy this movie. I still think that's like, there are certain movies that I like to watch, like seasonally, and around July, like, if it's a long 4th of July, weekend, I like to watch, obviously, Independence Day. And lately, the last couple of years, I've been throwing this one on. It feels like a fun, like, in the morning before you do your 4th of July barbecue, like put it on while you're doing your prep work, Yes.
We just did the same thing because this past 4th of July, it wasn't really safe to go anywhere. And so it was just like, what do you do? And this was just one of the 4th of July movies we put on. I'm like, that may become a thing. This may get added to the rotation each summer now. Cause
it's a great 4th of July.
That felt right.
Yeah, it's just like a good, like, in the background on that day type of movie, which sounds like a negative thing. It's not. It's actually it's really fun. I do think that, unfortunately, it's just like sometimes with these things that get so big, like Indiana Jones, Star Wars, whatever, it's just like there's only the 3, and then 5 is so bad that it taints 4 a little bit. I'm gonna go back. I'm so sorry. I'm not doing this on purpose. A little bit like Batman and Robin does to Batman Forever.
Oh,
where it's like,
sure.
I get it. It's not your thing, but I think maybe you're bringing a little bit of the second one into that, into that other one. I do think that part 5 is just so bad that maybe people, kind of associate 4 with it too. It's like, no. Like two different things.
Well, and there was also all of that talk for a while about Len Wiseman coming back to work with Willis for Die Hard Year One, which was simultaneously going to be a sequel and a prequel. And like that, just like, please, just can we let this go? Like, I already forget the fifth one even exists most of the time. I'm not even doing it on purpose. It's not like one of those things where just like, oh, and then the fifth one we never speak of. I mean, I would forget about it if I were ranking Die Hard movies.
Right.
But like, yeah, I think it's maybe just time to let it go. And I think the last thing I read was now it's going to be a TV series on Hulu, maybe. That's what they're doing with the Die Hard brand.
The thing with the prequel thing that that got me was like, the thing is with John McClane, if you really want to know, like, his story starts in the first one. He's just a normal ass guy until that first one starts.
They made Die Hard Year One. It's called Die Hard. Yeah, it exists.
It's like any sort of like, wow, what an adventure you had before. This happens in the Star Wars comics all the time, where those are now canon, and it's just like they pack so much in because it's a comic series. They have to do something, but they pack so much in between like A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back that by the time it's like, if I'm to believe all this is canon, then Empire Strikes Back is a lot less impressive by this point. It's like, oh, you've already done so much. You fought Darth Vader 7 times before you got to Bespin. Why is this interesting at this point? So it's like, if John McClane had all these adventures before he ever got on that plane to go to LA, then that movie doesn't work anymore.
No,
it works, but it doesn't.
It undermines it a little bit, which is why I think maybe just look, Bruce Willis obviously isn't super passionate about it anymore. Let's just let it go.
I think this is a job for the Reboot It crew. Maybe next season as to how do you?
Oh, there you go.
Because they're going to have to kickstart this eventually. They're not going to let Die Hard die easy.
Well, that's why, I mean, does the TV series mean they're going to like repurpose that prequel idea somehow? Is it going to be a retelling of just with John McClane or something else completely that just has the name Die Hard on it? I don't know. And it's very easy to feel very cynical about it, but also I would never have guessed that Fargo would work as a TV show either. And now I kind of prefer the TV series to the movie. So who knows?
That's true. I just, as we're kind of wrapping it up here, I just kind of find it interesting. There's kind of these Hallmark action movies of around that era. And it's interesting to me that Die Hard is the one that kind of like does get deified a lot. Like we wouldn't be sitting here talking about ranking all the Lethal Weapon movies because people are like, oh, Lethal Weapon's great. I think I maybe saw one of the others. I don't remember. Like, I feel like Die Hard is one of the ones for reasons like maybe I don't even quite understand. It's like it did set itself apart from the pack, all of them in that series. Whereas like we don't talk about the Beverly Hills Cop trilogy. You talk about Beverly Hills Cop. Die Hard, we're talking, again, it's like you talk to the right person, and I like Die Hard with a Vengeance. Oh, I actually grew up liking Die Hard 2 the most. Like, it's interesting to me, maybe I'm spinning in circles, but it's interesting to me that I find this series is kind of like out-survived other franchises. We're not talking about, are they going to do another Lethal Weapon series? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, even it's something like Lethal Weapon, such a big component of that is that Richard Donner directed all 4 of those. I mean, there's just a different kind of consistency, even though those, I mean, it's the same thing. By the time you get to the 4th one, it's just like, what in the world am I looking at here? But, but there are so many different flavors with the Die Hard movies that there are different aspects that are going to appeal to different people. So that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean, maybe that's why I actually, I respect Die Hard, and maybe why I judge Die Hard 2 a little bit differently is that 1, 3, 4, and even 5 to a certain extent, even if they're terrible and you don't like it, like they all have something a little bit different going for them from the other ones. 2, I kind of feel like is at least for me very much just one again.
Yeah.
But the others definitely feel like at least this is like a kind of a different flavor each time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that was the pitch for Die Hard 2. 1 again, because it was like, that was great. We got to get this moving fast. So I think that was kind of the MO.
I mean, to your credit, Batman and Robin, it's the same thing. It's like just cut and paste different villains' names. You don't even need to change the structure. It's all there. It's good. It works. We know it works. So yeah, The Die Hard saga. We did it. We did it in a lot less time than we did 3 movies of Batman. Die Hard is one of those series. It's been with me since high school to college to almost potentially marrying the wrong person. So I never would have known until I sat down and thought about it how like the touchstones in my life, Die Hard was somehow a part of it.
Ah, what a journey we've been on. I'm so grateful I got to share this insane cab ride through Central Park, chronicling your relationships in your life.
I mean, this was great. I even found ways to bug you about Batman Forever within a Die Hard episode.
I mean, I can hope, I can pray, but yeah, I should have known. Well, listen, I thank you for having me back on. I'm glad we were finally able to make this work. And I know you're not at the finish line just yet, but still, I want to say congratulations on what you've accomplished here. You should feel really good and really proud about all of this. I'm going to miss this podcast, but I am excited for all of your current and future endeavors. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, I took the lead from you. You guys wrapped up Hey Do You Remember, which was a favorite podcast of mine, and was just such a satisfying button on the end. I'm a little worried that yours is going to be like the I don't know, the beloved like The Office finale where everyone walked away happy, and mine's going to be Sopranos. Like, that's it. That was it. What are you doing here? But you know what? I still have about 3 episodes left. We're heading there, but you know, I think all of these are evergreen. You can go back and listen to them next Independence Day. Like, do I want to watch Live Free or Die Hard? I don't know. Let's listen to this jackass talk about it for an hour plus. Chris, I don't know where the future is going to go, but I hope at some point you and I can do something again, because our episodes are some of my absolute favorites, from Prometheus to talking the Dark Knight trilogy to talking all these Die Hard movies. I really appreciate it. And where can all the people find you? Because I say that and it's like, oh, it's time for the plugs. Go into the YouTube comments for one of the Batman episodes and the Prometheus. People are like, I like this Chris guy. Where can I find what he does? It's like a legitimate thing.
Oh boy. Well, okay. So I guess there are 2 things I'd point people to if they're interested. Like Billy mentioned at the top, there is a web series I wrote and directed called The Strange Case of Lucy Chandler. It's a neo-noir murder mystery in the vein of Veronica Mars or Jessica Jones. There are 12 episodes total. First 2 are out right now. Third one is on the way. And I also co-host a podcast called Rogues Gallery, where we focus on iconic villains from pop culture. So there's a strong focus on horror movies and all of those big franchises, but we also dabble in other genre stuff, as well as TV and books and comics. So you can find both of those things at 27thletterproductions.com. You can also come find me on Instagram or Twitter and track all of it down that way.
What is the 27th letter? What comes after Z? Or is it before A?
Well, that's the thing. It's indefinable. And that's art. That's art, baby. All the things you can't say.
I set you up and you just knock them down. I love it. I want to thank you guys for listening. I know the release schedule has been a little bit erratic, and I appreciate your patience. Like I said in the last episode, but if you missed it, I'll say it again. At this point, at this late in the game, I'm not going to put out any filler episodes. I know what I want to do. I know the people that I want to do those episodes with, and at this point, I'm willing to quote Hamilton, I'm willing to wait for it. So I do know, though, that you're not going to have to wait very long for the next episode. It is the return and the final appearance of my guy Victor Dandridge, who I think holds the record of being on this podcast the most. We're going to be talking, oh boy, I may have bitten off a little bit more than I can chew, because I remember really liking this movie and rewatching it. I was like, ooh, do I want to do this? But we're going to go back all the way to 2003's Daredevil, because I don't think it's quite as bad, although that Evanescence song, oof, that's going to be a hard one to get past. But we're going to be talking Daredevil next week with Victor Dandridge. It's going to be a lot of fun. And, I still got Ed Greer and Hal Rudnick will close out the show with me. So those are coming. Stay tuned. Thank you guys so much. Check out Reboot It. We're in season 4 right now on YouTube. And one way or another, whether it be on this show or Reboot It, somehow I will see you all next week.